Welcome to Room at the Table, an opportunity for you to join me, Betsy Cerulo, and my guests for conversations about creating equitable and inclusive workplaces where leaders rise above mediocrity and our teams thrive. Pull up a chair. There's always room at the table. Welcome to another meaningful conversation on Room at the Table. I am Betsy Cerulo, your host, and welcome to my guest today, Alfredo Santiago, a behavioral health expert with Chase Brexton Healthcare located in Maryland. Today, we are talking about grief and the many forms it shows up in. So pull up a chair, enjoy your favorite beverage, and let's get started. Welcome, Alfredo. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited about being here today.
Great. And I know you have so much wisdom to share on this topic, so we're going to jump right in. So, when it comes to grief, most people think it's usually about death of a loved one. So from your opinion, what are you seeing? What forms of grief are you encountering now with your patients?
Well, generally speaking, when we think of grief, we think about death and loss, right? A loss of a loved one. But lately, we've been seeing grief around losing employment, losing benefits, the fear of losing benefits. So sometimes grief is not the loss already happened. It's as you're walking through it and preparing for it, there's an aspect of loss. So a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And I hear the word I'm scared.
Yes.
Sad, angry, anxious. So that seems to be the culture lately in my sessions since January 2025.
And I see that so much with what we do on our workforce, because there are times, sadly, since January, we've had to reduce the workforce on some of our contracts. And it is so hard to call someone who's done so well and say, this has nothing to do with your performance. So, fortunately, we have a wonderful team of very caring, compassionate, and loving recruiters that they know how to field it. And but it is a sad time right now. And of course, when things are like this, it does make us more resilient. One of the things I have noticed, so when it comes to death of a loved one, and I'll speak for myself, some of the grief that I've encountered and that people in my generation are encountering, it's the loss of what was, the nostalgia. We long for what we had when those people were still in our lives. And so there's a lot of reflection on that nostalgia. And sometimes it evokes sadness, and sometimes it breeds, a smile of gratitude for that good times. Do you see that as well sometimes?
I'm glad you're mentioning that, because I think a lot of times, I do hear that theme, by the way, with my folks who are just remembering places where they come from and the loss of that place of moving and migrating and just moving from, even within the United States, moving from region to region. But also losing your identity, like my spouse died. So my identity was connected to my spouse or my loved one, my partner. Or I lost my job.
Yes.
And my identity was that I was the manager of this department. I supervised X amount of people. So losing identity for some people causes them a lot of grief. It's very humbling for some people right now, I'm sure, who are looking for work, knowing that there's so many people besides them actively looking in the workplace for new employment, and having to sit down again and prepare rearrange their resumes, practice for their resume, their interview conversation. And like maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago, they were in a position that they would hire people and interview people. So the roles change. So you lose your identity once you lose your role. You experience grief once you lose your role and your identity you're attached to. Again, the loved one you're attached to. So we see a lot of grief happening right now. In offices and outside offices, most of the time I think the grief is happening in the community, in people's homes, and we're not even aware of it.
Right. And I think, too, some of the grieving is also loss of one's voice, because there have been, and there continue to be, many aspects where people's voices are being squelched and they're not being heard. And that is another level of grief that I have encountered. And, I'll say it in terms of also for myself, because we all have to be really mindful of what we put out there and what we say. And it's different from this time last year.
Agreed.
Yeah. What type of emotions are showing up in the landscape, as a result of the landscape that our country is rapidly changing? What are you seeing?
Again, I'm going to repeat the strong emotion of fear of the unknown, anxiety, dysregulation of people's emotions, like irritable, where they normally have the calm demeanor, they might be irritable and have short-tempered, withdrawn.
Yes.
It's more like more behavior than emotion, but how that plays out, which is not emotions, but also behavior. People are isolating.
Yes.
I figure out what's my plan, my survival plan, my next plan. I already had a plan, but now it's, has to shift. And some people weren't ready and prepared to do so.
No.
So that definitely evokes a lot of anxiety in people and fear and uncertainty.
I've also encountered denial, where I will hear a common phrase, everything's fine. And you know what? Being an optimistic through tough times is really important. But saying everything's fine with no plan, it's not fine. It's not fine. And my hope is for all of us as we are going through changes that, there's this shock when there's a loss, whatever that loss is. And, to sit down and have the self-reflection, whether you're doing it with a professional or on your own, and really look at what if this happens, what direction can I go and who can I ask for help?
Well, denial is a defense mechanism, right?
It is.
So we use it to protect ourselves. Sometimes we don't want to reveal our emotions and our thoughts to others. Sometimes we don't want them even to entertain our own thoughts and emotions, right? So if we don't talk about it, it's not happening. We're keeping it at bay. I gave the example to a friend of mine the other day about a volcano that, we see the volcano and it's an awesome, thing to marvel at. But there is things happening that we don't see within the amount of dirt, how many feet high or how many miles high. Things are happening, not just the eruption. I think the eruption we also pay attention to, but there is unrest. Things are moving in different places and spaces. It's getting hot.
Yes.
Right? And so a lot of times people are not necessarily sharing what they're thinking and feeling. And at times the denial helps them to keep it covered. But like anything that after a while, you keep covered or compressed, it will erupt and
yes.
As a descriptor. And it can play out with mental instability. It can play out in aggression towards your loved ones, strangers.
Yeah.
So denial is not healthy. Although sometimes it's in the moment. It could be helpful in a moment, right? That I need to regulate before I can start disclosing how I'm feeling. Because maybe I need to figure out what I'm thinking and feeling. But in the long term, it can do more harm than good.
Absolutely. And, I know even from my own experiences, I can get short sometimes with my wife at the end of the workday. And fortunately, she and I have done and continue to do a lot of inner work. So I catch myself and I'll say, I'm sorry, that had nothing to do with you. And, she'll laugh and she'll say, I know, can you catch yourself before you come downstairs? Yes, I'm doing, I'm doing much better about that. Another form of grief that I see that gets swept under the rug sometimes is loss of pregnancy. And sadly, we've all know women who have had miscarriages, and we tend to forget about the spouse too is also undergoing a loss. And sometimes I think there's this perception, and it could just be people are just and I don't like the word ignorant, but they don't understand the long-term impact. But when a woman has a miscarriage, it's not as simple as, okay, well, the next week you bounce right back to it and everything's fine. There is such a deep loss that goes on for the woman and her family that experiences that loss. And I wish that there was more conversation out there for people to recognize the extreme and profound loss when a woman has a miscarriage.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this reminds me of like postpartum depression. People speak on that, right? And it's still, it's hard to admit. But there's also perinatal depression. When people are pregnant, in their pregnancy, they can already start developing pregnancies. Your changes that happen in your body, the changes that are happening in the relationships as you prepare to welcome a child or children, depending how your pregnancy looks like. But when there's a loss, when you have, again, an idea that you usually create with your partner, if you're with your partner, or if you're a single parent, you have in your mind a narrative about how that's going to play out, and all of a sudden, the loss disrupts that. And it's a shift. And some of us are not ready for that shift because that's not what the expectation is. So I was actually at a mental health fair this weekend, and one of the women, just like she had a lot of awareness. She was like, how about the partners? She was speaking specifically about the men, but some women are partnered with other women. And so, we have to remember that they're attached to somebody else.
Yes.
And not just their spouse or their loved one, it could be even family members, other siblings that were looking forward to having, a younger brother or sister. So that needs to be given attention to. And the whole thing that she's going to be okay, they're going to be okay, that approach is never supportive.
Yes.
It is never really truly showing compassion. It's not really showing up because, they'll fix themselves with time, but it needs attention. It needs compassion. It needs to say, how are you feeling? And really sit down to listen to the answer versus just asking the question, how are you today? But just asking it as if it's just a regular salutation, like good morning, hello. Being present for the person.
Exactly. And, in the workplace, there are times when being absorbed in your work is part of the healing, to have some kind of other distraction. Mm-hmm. But what I have seen and what I hear in a workplace, people don't know whatever the loss is. So I'll take, for instance, when someone passes away, people don't know how to respond to it in a workplace. You don't have to have a long and drawn out. I can just say from my own experiences, when I had some sudden losses in my family, over the years, I had customers, if I went out to a meeting or to lunch, just said, how are you? Just having someone ask the question, or, I'm really sorry for your loss, versus ignoring it and just keep going like everything's okay. It's really the other person's discomfort in addressing it. And again, you don't have to have a long and drawn out conversation, but being the person who's had the loss, when someone just says, I'm so sorry for your loss and how are you? I can't tell you the difference that made for me. That, that 10-second a statement made such a huge difference in my own healing.
It's the interaction, that compassionate moment, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, it doesn't even have to be a long, drawn-out conversation. The fact that they acknowledge my loss, some people want to give words of comfort, and they may be good at that. Some people are so eloquent at giving words of comfort. And for some people, that might be awkward.
Yes.
But it's still just acknowledging, I'm thinking of you, and how are you doing? It's a appropriate question. I think in our culture with setting boundaries,
yes,
it's a wonderful thing. But sometimes our boundaries are too tight that we forget to be our genuine self, to say, that person experienced a loss. We have all experienced a loss mostly in this, but especially if you live, past 50, you've definitely experienced loss. So just to show the compassion, the empathy, again, just like you just said, in just a moment of compassion, people receive that. It's part of the healing bond that we all need. And that's why connecting with others is so important. We can't have a healthy grief process if we isolate. It definitely takes others around you to be there present for you at work, at home, in your faith community, and whatever your tribe is.
Well, and there's the other part of that, especially in the workplace, you may have an individual that's really having such a hard time with coping with it, and the emotions are right there all the time. So there has to be a balance to that. How would you advise someone if you see that someone on your team or someone in the workplace just has continuous outpour of the grief during the workday? How do you advise people to be with that in an appropriate way?
And that's, again, it's about.
I know I put you on the spot.
No, because the scenarios around the scenarios, and every work culture is different. Like, do I get along with my coworker? Right. Are we colleagues and we're strictly business, or do we have lunch together? It's, different relationships, even in the workforce. Just again, being genuine, like, hey, I notice your sadness. Hey, I see you're so quiet lately. I'm here to offer you some support. Or I tell some of my coworkers, we pay for our employment assistance program. Maybe you want to contact them and have a few sessions. Like, remind people that you're available, or there's other things in place that can support them.
And, the other thing too is companies, regardless of the size, there's bereavement leave. Now, sometimes you see bereavement leave 3 days, a week, whichever. That doesn't mean that the grieving stops there. So as being a small business owner, over the years when we've had that happen, we can't necessarily give people indefinite periods of time to be out of the office. But what I do as a leader is, I pay attention and I watch for the cues for that person. And I have on several occasions had a conversation with the individual and said, why don't you just go home early today? It's okay. Just go home early today. Do what you need. And then, let me know how you are tomorrow if you want to come back tomorrow. So, every situation is different. And we have to be cognizant of that as leaders, that it's not a switch that flips, And then, the other loss too, that sometimes gets overlooked, loss of a pet. I've certainly had a lot of that, and our pets are our family.
Yes. I have had people see me for loss of their pets, different pets, not just traditional dogs and cats, other warm-blooded animals, mammals. And, it is, and you have to respect that and honor that.
Yes.
The attachment is, they may have been there since their birth. They may have been given to their pet by a loved one to them as a gift. Maybe during a difficult time, that pet came to your life and gave you so much comfort. So there is space for that. I don't think we have bereavement for that from most places, but employers that are compassionate will pick up on that and realize, this person, if they have a picture of their dog or cat or other animal in their office, it means a lot to them.
Yeah.
And
we're very mindful of that.
Yeah, which is one, it sounds like you are, so just, again, paying attention that people grieve differently. And I just want to just mention the bereavement of 3 days, 5 days. We're not robots. No. Now, thank you. That's all I needed. I'm back. I'm 100% present. No one can be 100% present after a loss of a loved one.
Yeah.
No one.
No, I can remember after one of my brothers passed away suddenly, and it was such a shock. I walked back into my office. We had services here in Maryland. We had services up in New Jersey for him. And I came back into the office. I remember I took a deep breath before I put my hand on the doorknob, and I walked in. And I just leaned against the door, and I have such a wonderful staff, and they just greeted me with hugs, and that made all the difference in the world. Again, not every workplace is like that. It doesn't mean that you go rushing up to somebody. You have to know the scenario, But when someone walks in after their bereavement leave, I have certainly seen and hear where people kind of run the other way. And it's not because they're mean. They just don't know what to do.
Yeah, because when there's nothing that in school they talk about grief. I don't remember that ever happening while I was from my formative years to high school, even college. Because the work that I do, of course, I've had grief and dying classes. But what I've just having conversations with people is just also acknowledging the diversity a lot of times that we have in our agencies, in our community. Like everybody grieves differently. Some people might have a ritual a year later after the person dies, or they might bury them or cremate them and then bury their remains and have a worship service or honoring them 6 months out.
Right.
And some people are like, wait a minute, you didn't have closure yet? Like, no, it's a process, it's what we do. Or they have to travel to a different country or different part of the United States. It prolongs the grief process and the rituals, but they should be honored because Absolutely. It means so much.
And different ethnicities have different ways that they grieve. I've certainly seen, I'm from an Italian upbringing, and I have certainly seen people practically dive into the coffins over at different times. And, it was something that my siblings and I would laugh about when we were younger, because we would see the older relatives do that. And as we got older, we understood it. I haven't jumped in at this time, but we understand it more, because as you get older, sometimes the grief is so profound, and we don't make fun of it anymore. I'll say that.
Yeah, different cultures are more emotional than other cultures. So you just still honor that because that's the way they express themselves. I'm from New Jersey, by the way, also. So, and I was raised around a lot of Italian Americans. I'm Puerto Rican descent. And so for us, after a person dies, a month later, people are praying for their soul to go to heaven, to a Catholic and practice that.
Yes.
A year later, it's not just for Catholics. A year later, sometimes people have a service, or they come together to honor the person's memory a year later after their death, their death anniversary. And just knowing when those dates come, death dates, birth dates, holidays.
Yes.
A lot of times those emotions will erupt, and people have to also pay attention to that. The first Thanksgiving after my father died, I remembered I would go up to New Jersey for Thanksgiving weekend. And as soon as I got on Route 95, immediately I got on Route 95, I started to cry. And I was like, why am I crying? Not thinking about anything, and just realizing my father would always call me, where are you on 95? And I was like, why does he always ask me where I am? He knows I'm coming. I'm going to arrive when I arrive. And it was because they always had a hot meal for me waiting for me. They timed it perfectly. There was a meal waiting for me. And I knew two things: that I would not receive that phone call that sometimes I took for granted, and that he wouldn't be at the other end of that drive to receive me, right? So we can be triggered at any given times in moments that we least expect it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I share that's the way my mother was. It was almost as though as soon as I crossed the Delaware Memorial Bridge, the phone rang so that the meal was hot.
Then total GPS,
Absolutely.
Love GPS,
Yeah. And so now when I'm on business trips and I know I'm going to drive through New Jersey, I'll stop at the cemetery. And, I think at this time of my life, when I drive up to the cemetery, now I'm at a point where I'm just like, I feel a sense of peace when I'm there. And there was one time where I stopped at Starbucks. I got a little treat. I sat there at the grave. I had my tea. I had my treat, because that's what my mom and I used to do. And I had such a feeling of peace, as though she was right there with me. So her spirit was there. I felt it. And, at times it feels so peaceful for me. And of course, there's times when it's sad. But, I guess that brings me to balance. So how can we balance out our grief to keep our souls calm? What do you recommend?
Well, Betsy, you just what you just mentioned, that was still very unique, very personal, right? Like that for you, for the minutes that you were there, brought you a lot of peace and connection. So being aware of what connects you. Sometimes you want to go to a cemetery I'll go to somewhere outdoors. It could be a lake, a river, ocean. Sometimes it's a special spot that you share, together, a restaurant. For people that different worship spaces, they might want to go and just reflect. Sometimes just sitting at a park bench, right?
Yeah.
I know my cousins, they like playing dominoes. And my father played dominoes. So sometimes I just watch them. I'm a terrible domino player. There's a strategy to dominoes, by the way. And just like cards. And when I watch them play, it brings me like joy because my father loved dominoes. And and I see their interactions and the words they say in Spanish that my father would use. And just moments like that bring comfort. They might not even know it, but as you're sitting there in that space, it fills you. So just knowing what you need in the moment for that healing process, the healing process of your grief.
There have been times over the years that I would set a place at the table at my grandmother's birthday or my mom's birthday. My brother, who I'd earlier spoken of, who passed away, on his birthday in October, I eat a piece of chocolate cake. I find it wherever I am. It may not even be the best kind of cake, but that's what I do on his birthday because he and I both loved it. So it's, so I've learned over time, I have these little rituals that have gotten silly, but they bring me some comfort.
And because it has a lot of value. We can't minimize the value that it brings, that it gives you and that it means to you in the connection in that moment. So that has a lot of value. It's showing also self-compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion is not just going out. It's also inward, right? I have to take care of myself, love me, comfort me. Mm-hmm. And hopefully there's others to help us along the journey. But focusing on self-care and also knowing what I need today to get through this day. Yeah. Hopefully something healthy, right?
Yeah, definitely. I had a session with a shaman. When was it? Over the past 6 months. And it was just talking about the losses in my family. And one of the things she had recommended is when I want to have a conversation and talk to my mom or my grandmother or my brothers, to light a candle. So I have, across in my office, I'll call it a little altar with special things on it. And when I feel that mode, I can talk to them anytime, but when I feel like I want to have a certain type of conversation, I'll dim the lights, usually in the evening. I'll light the candle and I'll just sit there and reflect, or I'll ask a question. And, again, this is something, it's simple, but it brings me a lot of peace, as though I'm in relationship with them. Whether or not their energy and their spirit is really there, for me, I feel like, okay, we're here together. And that has helped me a great deal.
No, it's interesting. Candles, it's so symbolic for so many people in so many cultures.
Yes.
So, for a lot of us, it also stands for light and life. So a lot of people do reflect having candles lit. Was it Elton John, The Candle in the Wind? The song,
yes.
Yeah. And talks a lot about light and, our sometimes with we blow out the candle. But even as we blow out the candle, there's still that smoke, that kind of rises, almost symbolic, it's not over. Even if we don't see that flame anymore, there's still an essence around it. And so I really appreciate that, the candle lighting. I also appreciate the Buddhist tradition of ringing a bell just to kind of center. Mm-hmm. And just to be quiet for a moment and allow yourself to feel relaxed, allow yourself to feel your emotions, allow yourself to feel connected. The quietness, there's a healing balm in the quietness, in the intentional quietness to connect with the memory of our loved one.
Absolutely. And, your expertise, you're working with people who have come to you, whether it's specifically for grief or any other reason that they want to do their inner work. So when you talk to a person who is reluctant, and I have certainly encountered people who are reluctant to finding well-being support, what do you suggest to them to perhaps open their minds to the possibility?
A lot of times people are just guarded, right? Because they may not be so They may not have a lot of insight to what's going on in their mind, and maybe that's a protective mechanism also. So kind of respecting that. And just, I think a lot of times just telling people when you're ready, and if you're ready, and these are some resources for you, and you give them 2 or 3. And like resources they can access at any time.
Right.
You don't have to speak to me, but I'm available when you're ready. Or, hey, you don't have to speak to me. Hopefully you'll find somebody that you feel comfortable with to take some time out and to talk about what you're going through. And if it comes from a genuine place, the person will receive it. And it's up to them, right, to make a decision whether they want to talk about it or not. As a therapist, I would always say speaking about what you're thinking and feeling just acknowledges the truth of the emotion, of the moments, of your personal grief, your story. But some people may not be ready to share it. But just make yourself available that I'm here for you, or I can direct you to someone else.
Right. So you've done this for a long time, and I know that there is a concept called transference. How do you care for yourself? Because you are receiving a lot of pain when people are talking to you. So what do you do as the receiver to care for yourself?
Well, part of the self-care conversation is to be self-aware. You have to be self-aware. So to know how I'm feeling today, am I able to discuss this serious topic with someone? Knowing that after this, or maybe I need to be very present in this moment, ready or not, I have to be present in this moment. But the aftercare, I might have to go for a walk, drink of water, put on my favorite music, movement. I definitely believe music and movement really helps people heal. It doesn't matter if you have any physical disabilities, even in your seat, just movement and just to kind of get familiar with your body and how you're feeling in the moment.
Yeah. I have certainly done a lot of different work where movement and music have been wonderful. And then the journaling of the feelings, sometimes there's so much that comes out in the written word, however you choose, whether you're on a computer, whether you're doing pen and paper. So there are so many ways that people can work through whatever they're experiencing, whether it's whatever piece of grief, part of grief that they're working through. So, I want to ask you, as we're bringing our conversation to a close, what little kernel of wisdom would you give to someone about grief?
I'm going to say this, and I don't want to, hopefully it doesn't sound cliche, but you are not alone. A lot of times we feel this deep sadness and aloneness because a person is no longer with me or us. But you are not alone because there are other people to support you. They may not be able to be that. They're not going to be that person. They don't replace your loved one. But connections are so important. And we're talking about, losing employment. Like, you had an identity, but because you have certain gifts, those gifts and that identity can shift and go in a different direction. So know your self-value, that you have value as a person, attached to a person, attached to a job, attached to a space. But also, as we detached, we still carry that with us, right? That doesn't just get cut off. There's no longer connection to that person, that place, that position. That is still part of our experience and part of our whole narrative, our life narrative.
Yeah. And, sometimes with that type of loss, it opens something up for the future. And even though in the moment someone can't see it, I've certainly been there where I just can't see it yet, is to, at some point in your process or your feeling, is to leave yourself open to a possibility, however that could look. And
to acknowledge maybe today I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And I probably won't be ready tomorrow, but then I'm open maybe, in a year from now, 2 years from now. Now, what I never do is tell people that you should be over it by now.
No,
You've been
never.
grieving for too long. that is the most insensitive comedy you can ever tell anyone. Or you'll get over it in 2 or 3 more months. You never put a timeline on grief because you never know what's going to trigger and bring it to the surface again.
Right. You could have you have lost someone decades ago, and something comes across you that just triggers an emotion of whatever that could be. And yeah, we have to acknowledge it, be sensitive, because when we squelch it, it takes even longer to not get over it, but it takes even longer to readjust. And
Betsy, I just wanted to say, a lot of times when we talk about grief, it's like a sadness. It's not a happy topic, but the happiness and the joy is that I was connected to this person who I loved and who loved me. And why am I missing them? Why am I hurting so much? Why is it so intense? Then you start remembering why you loved them, why they loved you. Then you start reflecting on the memories. And that should make you have joy. My father told terrible jokes, and so do I, because I realize I can see the way people respond to my jokes. But it makes me laugh that he told terrible jokes and he didn't care if he got a response or not. And I have his DNA, so I have that characteristic also. And then I start laughing when I see people. I say, "Oh, they didn't get it. I didn't deliver it very well." And so I chuckle because it reminds me of my father, right? I don't cry, I don't get serious. I laugh out loud. So all the memories don't necessarily mean that it's going to evoke sadness. Sometimes it'll make us smile from ear to ear. Sometimes there's just an inside, just a comfort, that person in that moment, you feel connected to them again in just that moment that you're having and appreciating that moment.
Yeah. Grief is a form of love.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Amen to that.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, it's a form of love. This is such a profound loss because I love this person so much that it has made impact in my heart, in my emotions, in my life. And
honor it. One last thing. One of the things when I have gone through a loss, I seem to have given myself permission to, maybe I'll stay in bed a little bit longer. Maybe I'll say no to that. Maybe I will eat that extra dish of pasta to make me feel good. But I noticed that over the different times that I've had loss, that I would give myself more permission to be.
That's self-care. Again, that's self-compassion. So that should be something that you should practice and feel okay with it. Because on the other side of that, there's some people who feel guilty about feeling happy or by doing something joyful, like they're not supposed to feel joy. Some cultures, you grieve for a year. It's almost like if you do anything that brings you joy in that year, it's almost like sinful, but no, you're allowed to experience joy. Yeah. Your loved one, I would hope, would want you to experience that you would experience joy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Alfredo, if any of our listeners would like to have a more in-depth private conversation with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I work at Chase Brexton Health Services. It's a small community health center in Maryland, and I work in the Baltimore office specifically. So they can reach me at my email, which is the easiest way. It's asantiago@chasebrexton.org. asantiago@chasebrexton.org. Whether they're a patient here or not, I can make myself available to give them resources locally or nationally.
Wonderful. Well, Alfredo, thank you so much for this conversation. It is meaningful. It is a topic that we encounter every day, and I appreciate your willingness and your vulnerability to talk about your own experiences, because when we share our own, it tends to help open up something else for somebody.
Well, I thank you for the invitation, and I thank you for sharing your stories about your loss and how you comforted yourself. I really appreciate it. That it brings a lot of comfort to other people, I'm sure, who are listening and watching this morning.
Thank you. Well, listeners, we complete our show today on grief. May you find so much love in your heart and be gentle with yourself and know that you can find us anytime and just continue to love. And again, grief is a form of love. So take good care, and thanks for listening today.
Thanks for listening to Room at the Table. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us on your favorite listening platform and share this episode with a colleague or 2 or 3. For resources to help you lead with purpose and build more equitable workplaces, visit roomatthetablepodcast.com.